I thought losing my job was the worst day of my life, until I saw how my own family reacted. I posted in our family group chat, "Just got fired, can anyone talk?" My sister replied, "Not now." My mom said, "You should have worked harder." That night, I cried so hard my chest hurt. My name is Harper Lane, and I'm 29 years old. I've always been the one who put family first. Birthdays, holidays, late-night calls when they needed help, I was always there. I had even given my own savings to help my brother pay off his debts. And now, when I needed just one kind word, they couldn't even give me that. I sat in my small apartment staring at my phone, reading their cold words again and again, like tiny knives stabbing the same wound. My job at the marketing firm wasn't just a paycheck, it was my pride. I worked long hours, stayed late to help the team, and believed loyalty meant something. But loyalty doesn't pay bills, and loyalty doesn't stop a company from cutting costs. I had been replaced by someone cheaper. It felt like my entire world collapsed in a single moment. I thought maybe my family would be my safe place, but instead, their words made me feel smaller than ever. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I remembered every time I had rushed to help them. When my sister needed a babysitter at midnight, I was there. When my mom's car broke down, I drove 3 hours just to pick her up. When my brother couldn't pay his rent, I sent him money even though it meant I would eat noodles for a month. And now, "You should have worked harder." That's all she could say. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was really worth so little to them. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was the same family group chat, my mom sending pictures of a dinner they all had together. No one even asked how I was feeling. It was like my bad news never happened. I wanted to delete the group entirely, but something inside me told me not to. I didn't know it yet, but keeping it would become the most satisfying choice of my life. I got up, made coffee, and sat at my desk to update my resume. I knew I needed a new job, but I also knew I couldn't keep living like this, being everyone's backup plan while they saw me as useless. Halfway through the day, while scrolling job listings, an ad popped up about a business investment opportunity in a major company. Out of curiosity, I clicked. The company name stopped my breath. It was their company. The same one my mom, my sister, and my brother had been working in for years. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Why was their company looking for investment? A quick search told me their company was struggling financially and looking for outside buyers. My first instinct was to close the tab and move on, but something in me shifted. I imagined walking into their office one day, not as Harper the struggling sister, but as Harper the owner. The thought made my heart race. Still, it felt impossible. I didn't have that kind of money, but I didn't close the page. I bookmarked it. I kept thinking about it all day, even while eating dinner. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat up in bed, my laptop open, reading everything I could about the company. I discovered they were willing to sell a controlling stake to a private investor for far less than I expected, because their debts were piling up fast. And that's when the idea truly took root. I wouldn't just move on from my family's coldness. I would make them regret every word. I know some people would say revenge is unhealthy, but when your own family treats you like you're nothing, sometimes revenge feels like the only language they understand. The next morning, I decided to make a plan. But before I tell you how I did it, make sure you like and subscribe so you can follow every twist in this story, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I want to see how far my story reaches. Anyway, back to that morning. I made a list of my skills, my contacts, and the money I had. It wasn't much, but I realized I could call in favors from a few people I had helped over the years. I reached out quietly without posting anything online. Every call I made, every email I sent, I kept thinking about my mom's words. "You should have worked harder." Well, I was about to work harder than I ever had in my life. I told no one in the family about my plan. Not my cousins, not even my closest friends. I didn't want a single hint to reach them. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a blur of meetings, calls, and research. I learned about the company's debts, their weaknesses, and even which board members were desperate to sell. Every piece of information was like a weapon I could use. At night, I would still get family group chat notifications, pictures of them smiling at parties, talking about work as if their jobs were secure forever. I kept quiet. The quieter I stayed, the louder my victory would be. By the end of the month, I had managed to line up 2 potential investors who trusted me enough to partner with me. One was an old client from my marketing days, and the other was a small venture capital group looking for quick returns. It wasn't easy. I had to pitch myself, not just the company. I had to make them believe that I wasn't just some fired employee looking for revenge, but a smart, calculated businesswoman who could turn a sinking ship into profit. Inside, my heart burned with both fear and excitement. I knew this was a risk. If it failed, I'd be broke. But if it worked, they'd never look down on me again. On the last night before signing the first agreement, I opened my family group chat again. My sister was complaining about her boss. My mom was telling her to work harder. I almost laughed out loud. They had no idea their boss would soon be me. The morning after securing my first investor, I woke up with a strange mix of excitement and fear. The sunlight streaming through my window felt different, almost like it was pushing me forward. I made coffee, sat down with my laptop, and opened the file where I'd been keeping all my notes. Every detail I had gathered about my family's company stared back at me: profit losses, unpaid debts, suppliers they owed money to, and even rumors about internal disputes between board members. This wasn't just a company in trouble, it was a company begging for someone to take control, and I planned to be that someone. The next step was finding a way in without making it obvious. If even one person connected me to the deal too soon, word would spread, and my family would find out before I was ready. I didn't want them preparing defenses. I wanted the shock to hit them like a tidal wave. So I created a shell company under a different name, one that sounded like any other private investment firm. I poured hours into making it look legitimate, with a clean website, a professional email address, and even a fake office address I rented virtually. My investors agreed to back this company on paper, so no trace of Harper Lane would be in the public deal. The feeling of pulling strings from the shadows was intoxicating. Every time I thought about my mom's dismissive text, "You should have worked harder," it fueled me to work even harder than before. Weeks passed. I attended virtual meetings with the company's board, always keeping my camera off and letting a lawyer I hired do most of the speaking. They thought they were talking to a representative of a quiet but powerful investment group. In reality, I was sitting on my couch in sweatpants, holding the strings to their future. During this time, my family's group chat remained the same. Pictures of them at work, complaining about long hours, bragging about their influence in the company. I responded politely when necessary, never hinting at what I was doing. My sister even sent me a message one night saying, "Hope you're doing better, still looking for work." I stared at her words for a long time before typing back, "Yeah, still looking." If only she knew. Negotiations dragged on longer than expected. Board wanted proof that we had enough capital ready to cover their debts. That meant I had to pull in my second investor faster than planned. I met with him in a quiet cafe downtown, a man named Steven, mid-50s, sharp suit, the kind of person who didn't waste time. "I'm in," he said after reviewing my proposal. "But Harper, be sure you can handle this. Buying a company isn't the same as getting a new job." I smiled in a way I hadn't in months. "I'm not buying a company," I said. "I'm taking back my dignity." That line stayed with me. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could build something far bigger than what they thought I was capable of. By the end of the month, we had all the paperwork ready. The lawyers were finalizing contracts and the board had agreed to our offer, but the deal wouldn't be official until the signing day, scheduled 2 weeks later. 2 weeks. That's how long I had to keep the biggest secret of my life from the very people it would destroy. In those 2 weeks, I played the role of the struggling sister perfectly. I told my mom I was applying for jobs. I listened to my sister complain about deadlines. I even congratulated my brother when he got a small promotion. Inside, I wanted to laugh at how temporary all of it was. The night before the signing, I barely slept. My hands were shaking, my mind running through every possible way this could go wrong. What if they found out? What if one of the board members mentioned my name accidentally? I reminded myself that everything was watertight. The deal was in the name of the shell company, the investors were prepared, and legally, there was no way for my family to connect it to me until I chose to reveal it. Signing day came. I wore a plain black dress and tied my hair back, nothing flashy. My lawyer met me at the corporate office where the deal would be finalized. The board members were polite but tired. They looked like people desperate to be done with a sinking ship. I shook hands, signed papers, and listened to the sound of my pen scratching across documents that would change everything. When the last signature was in place, the lead board member said, "Congratulations, you now own 67% of the company." My heart almost stopped. It was real. I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall. My phone buzzed the moment I stepped outside. It was the family group chat, my mom sending a message. "Big news at work. We're being bought out by some private investor. Everyone's nervous, don't know what's going to happen." I stared at the screen, smiling so wide it hurt. I typed back, "Wow, that's huge. Hope it works out for you." My sister replied, "Yeah, fingers crossed it's not someone awful." I locked my phone without answering. Oh, they'd find out soon enough. Over the next few days, I stayed silent while the news spread inside the company. Employees whispered, rumors flew, and my family became more anxious. My brother posted on Facebook, "Massive changes coming at work. Management won't tell us anything yet." I almost commented, but I held back. I wanted the reveal to be in person. I arranged a meet and greet at the company headquarters for the new owner to meet the senior staff. Of course, the invitation didn't say my name. It simply said, "Mandatory attendance for all department heads and executives. Meet your new leadership." My mom, my sister, and my brother all received it. The night before the meeting, my sister texted me, "Everyone at work is freaking out about tomorrow. I wish you could be there. It's going to be intense." I typed back, "Yeah, I bet it will be." I could almost feel the walls closing in around them, though they didn't yet realize I was the one pulling them tighter. Tomorrow, their comfortable world would end, and my new world would begin. The morning of the reveal felt like stepping into a storm I had been building for months. I woke up before sunrise, my heart pounding in a steady rhythm that matched the ticking clock on my nightstand. I had laid out my outfit the night before, a crisp white blazer, black fitted pants, and heels that clicked with authority. I wanted to look nothing like the sister they dismissed in the group chat. I wanted them to see a version of me they never believed existed. As I sipped my coffee, I scrolled through the family group chat. My mom had sent a nervous message at midnight. "Big meeting today. The new owner is coming in. Rumors are everywhere." My sister had replied, "I can't sleep, I'm too anxious." My brother had sent a thumbs-up emoji, probably trying to pretend he wasn't worried. I closed my phone and focused on my plan. Meeting was set for 10 a.m. I arrived at the headquarters an hour early, meeting with the HR director who had been informed privately about my identity. She was the only one in the building who knew the truth before this morning. "They're going to lose their minds," she whispered with a smile. I smiled back but kept my voice steady. "That's the idea." We went over the order of the meeting, the introduction from HR, the announcement of the sale, and then my entrance as the majority shareholder and CEO. I wanted the moment to be slow, drawn out, so the tension would eat at them before I walked in. At exactly 10 a.m., the conference room was full. I waited in the hallway, listening through the partially open door. The HR director spoke first. "As you all know, the company has been acquired by a new majority owner. Today, you'll have the opportunity to meet them and hear their vision for the future." I could hear murmurs ripple through the room. Someone whispered, "I bet it's one of those big corporate guys." My sister's voice followed, sharp with irritation. "Well, whoever it is, they'd better not mess with my department." I almost laughed out loud. The HR director continued, "Please welcome the new owner, Harper Lane." I stepped inside. Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself has frozen. My mom's eyes went wide first. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. My sister's face drained of color, her jaw tightening. My brother just blinked, as if trying to process whether I was real or some kind of hallucination. I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking against the polished floor. I stopped in the center, looked directly at my family, and smiled. "Good morning. It's nice to see some familiar faces." The room stayed dead quiet. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds before speaking again. "A few months ago, I lost my job. I reached out to my family, asking if anyone could talk. Some of you said you were busy. Others told me I should have worked harder." I glanced at my mom. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well," I continued, "I took that advice. I worked harder. I worked so hard, in fact, that I bought the company you all work for." A low gasp went through the crowd, but my eyes stayed locked on my family. My sister finally found her voice. "You're joking." I tilted my head. "Does it look like I'm joking?" The HR director handed me the official documents, which I placed on the table for everyone to see. The company seal, the signatures, it was all there. "As of last week, I said. I own 67% of this company, which means I'm your boss. My brother shook his head slowly. How did you even? I cut him off. By working harder. The room shifted into uneasy whispers. I turned my attention to the rest of the staff. For those of you who aren't my family, let me be clear. I'm here to fix what's broken. The company has been bleeding money for years, and that ends now. Some changes will be uncomfortable but necessary. For those who work hard, your jobs are safe. For those who don't, I let the sentence trail off, letting them fill in the rest themselves. Then I looked directly at my sister. And for those who like to say, not now when someone needs help, well, I guess now's not a good time for you either. Her cheeks turned red. My mom still hadn't spoken. She just stared at me, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Why? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this? I took a deep breath. Because you taught me something. You taught me that no one is going to save me but me. You taught me that when I'm down, people won't always care. So I built myself up, and now I don't need your approval. I don't need your support. I just need you to understand one thing. Never underestimate me again. The HR director ended the meeting shortly after, sensing the tension in the room. People began to file out, stealing glances at me like they weren't sure if they should congratulate me or keep their distance. My mom, sister, and brother stayed seated. I knew they'd want to speak to me privately. I walked toward the door, then turned back to face them one last time. By the way, I said, this isn't just business. This is personal. I'll be reviewing every department, starting with yours. Then I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. In the hallway, my phone buzzed. It was a message in the family group chat from my sister. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wanted them to sit in that room a little longer, feeling the shift of power in every breath. This was only the beginning. I didn't reply to my sister's message that day. Instead, I walked out of the building with my head high, the late morning sun warming my face as if even the sky approved of what I'd done. My driver, yes, I'd hired one for the day just to make an entrance, opened the door for me. I slid in, exhaled slowly, and let the weight of the moment sink in. Months of planning, sleepless nights, and quiet plotting had all led to that room, those faces, that silence. But I knew this wasn't the end. The real work was just beginning. Owning the company wasn't just about sitting in a big office. It meant fixing what was broken and, more importantly, setting the tone for the future. My future. I spent the afternoon in my new office, a corner space with glass walls and a panoramic view of the city. I had claimed it not because it was the biggest, but because it symbolized clarity. I wanted everyone, including my family, to see that I wasn't hiding. My assistant, a sharp woman named Clara whom the board had assigned to me, handed me a stack of files. These are the department performance reports for the last 12 months. You're going to want to see this. I flipped through them, scanning numbers and names. As my eyes hit the marketing department report, I froze. My sister's name was right there, under department head. The performance numbers were dismal. Missed deadlines, over-budget projects, and client complaints. I smiled slowly. This is perfect, I muttered. Clara raised an eyebrow. Perfect, I nodded. Let's schedule performance reviews for all department heads, starting with marketing, and make sure they know this is not a formality, it's an evaluation that could change their position in the company. Clara gave a small, knowing smile. Understood. 2 days later, the reviews began. I sat at the head of the conference table, a pen in my hand and the performance reports spread out before me. My sister walked in, trying to look confident, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She sat down, folding her arms. So, you're really going to do this? Review me like I'm just another employee? I kept my voice calm. You are just another employee. In fact, you're a department head whose performance is below acceptable standards. If you weren't my sister, you'd already be on probation. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely rattled. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Enjoying holding people accountable, yes. Enjoying seeing my own family think they can slack off while I run this company. No, she leaned forward. You know, you could have just come to us, told us you were doing this. We could have worked together. I met her gaze. When I came to you after losing my job, you told me, not now. That was my answer. Now this is yours. The review ended with her being placed on a strict improvement plan, deadlines, budget controls, and weekly updates directly to me. She walked out without a word. Next came my brother. His report showed moderate performance, but there were notes about missed opportunities and a lack of initiative. He tried to charm his way through the review, cracking jokes and leaning back in his chair like we were at a family barbecue. Come on, Harper, he said. You know I'm doing fine. Why fix what's not broken? I kept my tone professional. Fine isn't good enough. This company is in trouble and fine doesn't save jobs. I expect you to do more than show up and collect a paycheck. He frowned, clearly unused to being challenged by me. You've changed, he muttered. I smiled faintly. That's the point. My mom was the last review of the day. She wasn't a department head, but she'd worked in administration for over a decade. When she walked in, she didn't sit right away. I still don't understand why you're doing this, she said. We're your family. Exactly, I replied, and I'm giving you the same chance I'm giving everyone else to prove you belong here. She finally sat, folding her hands tightly in her lap. Her performance was steady but outdated. She hadn't kept up with new systems, and other employees were quietly covering for her. You're not being fired, I told her, but you are being moved to a role where you can be trained on updated processes. If you refuse, you'll have to resign. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't about performance, this is about payback. I leaned forward. It's about both. You didn't believe in me, you thought I was weak, and now you're learning I'm not. If that feels like payback, maybe you should think about why. She stood abruptly and walked out without looking back. Over the next week, the changes began. Budgets were tightened, lazy managers were replaced, and departments that had been coasting were forced to produce results. Some employees hated me for it, but others started to respect me. They saw that I wasn't just some silent owner collecting profits. I was involved, I was decisive, and I didn't play favorites. The family group chat went quiet. Days passed without a single message from my mom, sister, or brother. The silence was almost louder than their words had been before. But I didn't reach out. I had no intention of softening the blow. One Friday evening, just as I was packing up to leave the office, Clara stepped into my office. You should see this, she said, holding out her phone. It was a social media post from my sister, an angry rant about power-hungry people who let personal grudges ruin good companies. The comments were split. Some coworkers defended her, but others hinted that maybe she hadn't been doing her job as well as she thought. I set the phone down and smiled. She's cracking, I said quietly. And when people crack, they make mistakes. What's next? Clara asked. I looked out at the city skyline, the sunset painting the glass towers in gold. Next, I said, I make it clear this isn't temporary. I'm not just here to shake things up, I'm here to stay. That weekend, I signed a public statement to all employees announcing a long-term restructuring plan. It made the local business news. My family couldn't ignore it now. The whole city knew I was running the show. And the more public it became, the harder it would be for them to pretend it wasn't happening. I didn't just want them to answer to me at work. I wanted them to live with the knowledge, every single day, that the person they dismissed was the one keeping the roof over their heads. By Monday morning, the aftershocks of my announcement and the first wave of restructuring were visible in every hallway of the building. People moved differently now, quieter, quicker, more alert. Conversations hushed when I passed by. Even those who had never spoken to me before now offered cautious smiles or nods, testing the waters of this new leadership. But I wasn't fooled. Respect in the workplace wasn't earned with one big reveal. It was earned by proving, day after day, that you weren't just a fluke. And I intended to prove it. I started the day with Clara handing me a thick folder. This is the updated budget proposal, she said. Every department's requested adjustments are in here. Marketing is already pushing back. Of course they were. My sister had sent me a formal email late Friday night requesting a 20% budget increase for a campaign she wanted to run. It was overambitious, unrealistic, and based on numbers she couldn't back up. I marked it with a bold red DNIED and sent it back with a note. Deliver results with the current budget. Prove you can manage resources effectively before asking for more. Within 10 minutes, she replied, This is going to tank our numbers. I typed back, Then be creative, that's what leadership is for. I didn't hear from her again. Around 10 a.m., I walked the floors, department to department. Employees looked up nervously as I stopped to ask questions about workflow, client retention, and productivity. Some gave polished answers, others hesitated, unsure if they were walking into a trap. But I wasn't here to humiliate anyone. I wanted to understand where the cracks really were. In the IT department, a mid-level manager told me they'd been requesting new software for over a year, but upper management had stalled the process. It would save us hours every week, he explained. And it's cheaper than the outdated system we're using now. I approved it on the spot. His eyes widened like he'd never seen a decision made that fast. Thank you, he said. Seriously. Little by little, I could feel some employees realizing I wasn't just here to wield power, I was here to make things work. But not everyone saw it that way. By lunch, Clara came into my office again. "You're going to love this," she said dryly, holding her phone. It was a private Facebook post from my brother that someone had screenshotted and sent to me. "New boss is on a power trip. This place is becoming a nightmare." He hadn't even bothered to hide who he was talking about. I laughed quietly. "He's making it too easy." "You want me to respond?" Clara asked. I shook my head. "No, let him dig his own hole. We'll handle it professionally." That afternoon, I called a meeting with the heads of every department to discuss the restructuring plan in detail. My family would be there, front and center, with nowhere to hide. As the room filled, I stood at the head of the table, the large city skyline behind me. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to make one thing clear: this restructuring isn't optional. Every department will be held to higher standards, and excuses will not be accepted. The future of this company depends on results, not comfort." My sister shifted in her seat, crossing her arms tightly. My brother avoided my eyes. My mom, sitting at the far end, just stared at the table. We went through each department, line by line, discussing changes, cuts, and goals. When it came to marketing, my sister's domain, I didn't hold back. "This department has underperformed for the last 3 quarters, I said. "We're cutting unnecessary expenses, reassigning 2 team members to sales, and implementing weekly progress reports that will come directly to me." My sister's voice cut through the room. "You're singling me out." I met her gaze without blinking. "I'm holding you accountable. If you were a stranger, this would be the same conversation." "But I'm not a stranger," she shot back. "I'm your sister." "Exactly," I said coldly. "Which means you should have known better than anyone how hard I've had to work to get here, and you should know better than to expect special treatment." The room was silent. I moved on without giving her a chance to reply. When the meeting ended, several department heads came up quietly to thank me for being direct. My family left without saying a word. That evening, the family group chat lit up for the first time in days. My mom sent, "We need to have a private conversation, just us. This isn't the place to air family issues." My sister added, "You're making enemies here. You think you're winning, but people talk." My brother simply said, "Careful." I didn't answer. They wanted to talk on their terms, but that's not how this was going to work anymore. Instead, I called Clara into my office the next morning. "I want a full audit of every project my sister and brother have worked on in the last year. I want to see the numbers, the timelines, the budgets, everything." Clara's eyes glinted with curiosity. "Looking for something specific?" "I'm looking for proof," I said. "Proof of whether they've been doing their jobs or coasting by." 2 days later, the audit was on my desk, and it was worse than I thought. My brother had been signing off on expense reports without reviewing them, allowing thousands in unnecessary costs. My sister had inflated campaign results in her reports to make them look more successful than they were. My mom's department had multiple complaints from vendors about late payments that had nothing to do with company policy, just disorganization. It was all there, in black and white. That afternoon, I scheduled a mandatory meeting for the 3 of them in my office. They walked in together, their faces tight with suspicion. "Close the door," I said. My sister crossed her arms. "What is this about?" I slid the audit across the desk. "It's about this, all of it. You've been sloppy, dishonest, and careless. If you weren't my family, you'd already be out the door." My brother's jaw tightened. "You're just looking for reasons to get rid of us." "No," I said evenly. "I'm giving you one last chance to prove you can keep up. But understand this, your last name doesn't protect you here. This is my company now, and everyone plays by the same rules." My mom finally spoke. "You've changed, Harper." I looked at her steadily. "No, Mom, I've always been this person. You just never gave me the chance to show you." The meeting ended with them leaving in silence again. I could feel the distance between us growing, not just as coworkers, but as family, and honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't here to win back their love. I was here to build something they could never take away from me. As the week closed, Clara came into my office with a smirk. "Word is your family's not handling the pressure well. People have overheard your sister arguing with her team, your brother, been making mistakes, and your mom, well, she's been quieter than usual." I leaned back in my chair. "Good. The more they crack, the easier it'll be to make my next move." "And what's that?" Clara asked. I smiled faintly. "You'll see soon enough." Because I knew exactly how this was going to end, and it wasn't going to be gentle. The ink on the purchase papers was barely dry when the reality of what I had just done began to sink in. I had gone from being jobless, ignored, and humiliated by my own family to owning the very company that gave them their cushy lifestyles. The weight of the keys to the empire they never thought I could touch sat heavily in my pocket, but it wasn't a burden. It was power, and I intended to use it carefully. The night before the official announcement, I barely slept. I kept picturing the group chat, those cold little messages. Not now. You should have worked harder, burning in my mind. My phone was silent now. No, are you okay? No, what are you up to? It was almost funny how quickly people disappear when you're down. Morning came and I dressed sharply, not to impress anyone, but because I wanted to look like I belonged at the head of the table. My driver pulled up to the headquarters, and I could already see my mother's car in the parking lot. She was there early, probably for another round of micromanaging the staff and making sure people respected her position as the CEO's wife. Little did she know her reign was over. I stepped into the lobby and the receptionist, who I had met years ago when I came to drop off lunch for my sister, looked startled. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here for the board meeting," I replied, handing her my new access pass. The gold strip gleamed under the lights and her eyes widened. She scanned it, then quickly stood up straighter. "Right this way, Ms. Parker." Walking through those glass doors felt surreal. Every hallway I passed was filled with employees who either ignored me before or didn't even know I existed. Now their eyes followed me. In the boardroom, the air was thick with tension. My sister sat near the head of the table, scrolling on her phone. My mother was talking animatedly to one of the shareholders, her laugh sharp and calculated. When they saw me, there was a flicker of confusion, like I had accidentally walked into the wrong party. I took the empty chair at the head of the table. "That's reserved for the CEO," my sister said with a smirk. I looked her straight in the eye. "It still is." Silence. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "Let's begin. First order of business, the transfer of ownership." He slid the documents across the table. My mother's hands froze mid-gesture. My sister leaned forward. "Transfer to who?" The lawyer's voice was steady, but I caught the faint hint of satisfaction in it. "To Ms. Parker." Every head turned toward me. My sister let out a short laugh, the kind people use when they think something is a bad joke. "You're kidding, right?" My mother's face drained of color. "This is impossible. She doesn't have the funds," I interrupted. "Oh, I do, and the papers are signed. As of this morning, this company is mine." The sound of the clock ticking on the wall became deafening. My sister's jaw tightened. My mother's lips trembled, but not with sadness, with rage. "You don't know how to run a company," she spat. I leaned back in the chair, letting the weight of my words sink in. "Maybe not yet, but I know how to own one, and I know exactly what to do with people who treat family like they're disposable." The rest of the meeting was a blur of shocked faces, whispered side conversations, and one shareholder quietly smirking as if they'd been waiting for this day. When it ended, my mother followed me out into the hall. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you do this?" I stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because the night I lost my job, I needed my family, and you told me I should have worked harder, so I did." I didn't wait for her reply. I walked out of the building, the sun warm on my face, and for the first time in months, I felt completely in control. But this was just the beginning. I hadn't bought the company just to own it. I had plans that would make sure they'd never look at me the same way again. I was going to change everything from the ground up, starting with the people at the top. The following week, I called a staff-wide meeting. My mother and sister sat in the front row, still in disbelief, probably thinking I'd reverse the decision or give them back their positions. Instead, I introduced a new leadership team, people who had been overlooked and underpaid for years. People who actually cared about the company. I watched my sister's eyes widen as she realized her name wasn't on the list. My mother's face was a mask of polite fury, but I could see her nails digging into her palm. When the meeting ended, I made my final announcement. From today, the company will run differently. Respect, fairness, and accountability are no longer optional. They're required. I walked off stage to the sound of applause, and it wasn't for my family anymore. That night, I sat in my office, the one that used to belong to my father, looking out over the city lights. My phone buzzed with messages from distant relatives, suddenly checking in now that I was the one in charge. I ignored them all. My focus was on the bigger picture, because tomorrow, my plan to truly make them feel what I felt would begin. And this time, they couldn't just tell me, "Not now." This time, they had to listen. The moment the papers were signed, I knew there was no turning back. My name wasn't on the main documents, of course. I had set everything up through a holding company so that no one in my family could connect the dots too soon. But the day had finally arrived when the new owner would be officially announced. Their company, the same one they had worked for all their lives, the same one they thought was their pride and legacy, was now mine. I didn't sleep much the night before. Not because I was nervous, but because I could already imagine the look on their faces when they found out. I kept picturing my mother's cold voice saying, "You should have worked harder," when I told her I got fired. I remembered my sister's short, dismissive, "Not now," as if my pain wasn't even worth her time. Those words had stayed with me like little scars. Today was the day those scars became my armor. That morning, I arrived at the office early. The staff didn't know me personally yet, but soon they would. I sat quietly in the conference room, listening to the nervous chatter from employees outside. They had no idea what kind of announcement was coming. The company had been struggling for a while, which was why it was for sale in the first place. My family, my mother, my sister, and even my brother-in-law worked in high positions there. They had been treating the lower-level employees like they were beneath them. I knew because I'd heard stories from people who used to work under them. And now, those same people were going to have to answer to me. The press conference started right on time. The outgoing CEO gave a long speech about new beginnings and fresh leadership. My family sat in the front row, looking bored, as if they already knew the new owner was going to be some corporate stranger they could manipulate. And then, the CEO said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "I'm honored to introduce the person who will be taking this company to new heights. Please welcome the new owner." There was a pause, and I stood up from the back row. The room went silent. My sister's jaw dropped. My mother blinked as if she had just seen a ghost. My brother-in-law's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I walked slowly to the front, my heels clicking against the floor. Every step was deliberate. I wanted them to feel the weight of it. I stood at the podium and took a deep breath. "Good morning," I said, smiling just enough to make them uncomfortable. "Some of you might recognize me. A few months ago, I was sitting in my apartment, unemployed, wondering how I was going to rebuild my life. I reached out to my family for support. I said, 'I just got fired, can anyone talk?' My sister replied, 'Not now.' My mother said, 'You should have worked harder.' And that day I realized, sometimes family is the last place you should expect kindness." My voice didn't shake. I kept my eyes locked on them. But I learned something important in those weeks. I learned that rejection can be fuel. I took that fuel and built something new. I worked with people who believed in me, people who saw my value, and now here we are. I let the silence hang before saying the next part. "This company is mine now." Gasps filled the room. My sister looked like she wanted to sink into her chair. My mother's face turned pale. My brother-in-law shifted uncomfortably. I could feel the air grow heavier. "From today onward," I continued, "things will be different here. Respect will no longer be optional. Positions will be earned, not inherited. And anyone, family or not, who cannot meet those standards will no longer have a place in this company." I didn't need to say their names. Everyone knew exactly who I was talking about. When the meeting ended, I walked past them without breaking my stride. My sister grabbed my arm. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Watch me," I said, pulling my arm free. My mother tried to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. That afternoon, HR sent out notices for restructuring. My family members were all reassigned to lower positions. They weren't fired, not yet. That would have been too easy. I wanted them to stay, to feel every ounce of the shift in power, to understand what it was like to work without privilege. For the next few weeks, I barely interacted with them. I let the new systems I implemented speak for themselves. My sister now reported to someone she used to mock. My mother had to sit through training sessions on communication and empathy. My brother-in-law had to share an office with 2 other managers, and every single day, I saw them avoiding eye contact with me in the hallways. One evening, as I was leaving the building, my sister stopped me again. Her voice was quieter this time. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. I looked her in the eye and said, "Because I wanted you to understand how it feels to be left alone when you need someone most. Maybe now you'll think twice before turning your back on someone who reaches out for help." She didn't reply. She just stood there, her eyes glossy with something that almost looked like regret. Almost. A month later, the company's performance had improved dramatically. Employees were happier, productivity was higher, and for the first time in years, there was a sense of unity. Except, of course, when it came to my family. They were still here, still working, but they had lost the comfort of being untouchable. They were just like everyone else now. On the day of the annual company party, I gave a short speech thanking the team for their hard work. And as I stood there, looking at the people who had supported me and helped me get here, I realized something important. Revenge was never really the goal. The goal was respect, and I had earned it not from my family but from people who mattered. When I left that night, I saw my mother and sister standing by the door. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. The look in their eyes told me they finally understood. They couldn't breathe that day they saw me take over their company. And maybe, just maybe, they never would breathe as easily again.